The Laws of Human Nature, by Robert Greene. Introduction. In the year 432 BC, a shadow fell over the city of Athens. The air, usually filled with the sounds of commerce and philosophical debate, grew heavy with dread. Representatives from their arch-rival, the militaristic city-state of Sparta, had delivered an ultimatum: submit to our terms, or face war. The citizens of Athens gathered on the Nix Hill, their voices a storm of fear and fury. The hawks cried for a first strike, a bold attack on Spartan land. But the wiser men knew this was suicide. The Spartan army was a machine of war, nearly unbeatable on the ground. The doves pleaded for peace, to accept the terms, but others saw this for what it was: a show of weakness that would only embolden their enemy. The arguments raged, emotions ran high, and the city stood on the brink of a decision that could lead to its ruin. Then, as the afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon, a hush fell over the crowd. A familiar figure, now over 60 years old, stepped forward. This was Pericles, the elder statesman of Athens. For decades, he had guided the city not with force or fiery speeches, but with a strange, calming wisdom. He was a leader unlike any they had known. He spoke not of glory, but of patience. Not of conquest, but of consolidation. He had used this philosophy to build Athens into a beacon of prosperity and beauty, commissioning the great Parthenon that stood watch over them. Now, as his city teetered on the edge of chaos, he began to speak. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise. He spoke of a new kind of warfare, a defensive strategy. "Let the Spartans come," he said. "We will not meet them on the field. We will bring our people within the city walls, rely on our navy to keep us supplied, and raid their coasts. They will grow frustrated. Their money will run out. Their alliances will crumble. What I fear," he concluded, "is not the enemy's strategy, but our own mistakes." The Athenians listened, and though his plan satisfied neither the hawks nor the doves, they trusted his wisdom. They voted to follow his lead. But what happened next is a lesson for all time. The war began, and a great plague swept through the crowded city, killing a third of the population, including Pericles himself. With their rational guide gone, the Athenians fell prey to their emotions. They abandoned his patient strategy and, fueled by grief and anger, launched a disastrous, ambitious expedition to Sicily, a campaign so foolish it would have been unthinkable under Pericles. The expedition ended in a complete catastrophe, wiping out their army and navy. The golden age of Athens was over, not because of the strength of Sparta, but because the Athenians had lost control of themselves. This story, from thousands of years ago, is the story of us. It is the story of what happens when human nature is left unchecked. We like to think we are in control, that we are rational beings planning our lives. But as Robert Greene reveals in his masterwork, The Laws of Human Nature, we are dominated by forces we barely understand. We are pulled by deep-seated emotions, ancient tribal instincts, and the fragile ego that lives within us all. Greene, the celebrated author of the 48 Laws of Power, has spent a lifetime studying the patterns of human behavior, from ancient kings to modern titans of industry. The Laws of Human Nature is his code book for deciphering the most complex and dangerous animal on the planet, us. By the end of our time together today, you will have a new lens through which to see the world. You will learn to recognize the hidden motives behind people's actions, to see through the masks they wear, and to protect yourself from the toxic individuals who thrive on chaos. But more importantly, you will learn to look inward, to confront the darker parts of your own nature, and to master the emotional self that so often leads to our greatest mistakes. This isn't just about understanding others, it's about gaining control of your own destiny. Book summary. Have you ever found yourself doing something you knew was a bad idea, but you just couldn't help it? Maybe you fell for someone who was clearly wrong for you, or you got swept up in an argument and said things you instantly regretted. You look back and wonder, what came over me? It feels as if a stranger is living inside you, making decisions without your permission. Robert Greene tells us that this stranger isn't a stranger at all. It's the most fundamental part of who we are, our emotional self. This is the first and most important law of human nature we must understand, the law of irrationality. You see, we like to imagine ourselves as rational beings. We think we make decisions based on logic and careful thought. But the truth is, our emotions are the ones in the driver's seat. They color our thinking, making us veer toward ideas that soothe our ego and confirm what we already want to believe. They make us see what we want to see, not what is actually there. This disconnect from reality is the source of our worst decisions and the negative patterns that haunt our lives. Think back to Pericles and the Athenians. As long as he was there, he acted as their rational mind, their inner Athena, as Greene calls her. He forced them to think long-term, to resist the emotional pull of a glorious, decisive battle that would have destroyed them. But the moment he was gone, their emotions took over. They were driven by fear, grief, and a desperate need for a quick victory. Their decision to invade Sicily wasn't based on sound strategy, it was an emotional reaction, a fantasy of easy conquest that led them to ruin. We do this all the time, just on a smaller scale. We invest in a risky scheme because we're excited by the promise of quick money, ignoring the warning signs. We stay in a bad relationship because we're afraid of being alone. We get into arguments online, fueled by outrage, without ever truly listening to the other side. Greene says that rationality is not something we're born with. It's a skill we must cultivate. It's the ability to step back from the heat of the moment, to recognize the emotions that are clouding our judgment, and to think instead of just react. So, how do we begin to cultivate this power? The first step is to simply recognize the biases that our emotions create in our thinking. One of the most powerful is the confirmation bias. This is our tendency to look for evidence that supports what we already believe. If you think a certain investment is a good idea, you'll subconsciously seek out articles and opinions that agree with you, and you'll dismiss the ones that don't. You're not searching for the truth, you're searching for reassurance. Then there's the conviction bias. We believe that if someone says something with great passion and conviction, it must be true. Demagogues and charismatic con artists use this all the time. They know that a confident, dramatic performance can be more persuasive than 1,000 facts. They're not selling an idea, they're selling an emotion. And perhaps the most common is the superiority bias. We all have a tendency to think we're a little more rational, a little more ethical, and a little smarter than the average person. We see the irrationality in others, but we're blind to our own. When we make a mistake, we blame circumstances. When someone else makes a mistake, we blame their character. These biases are operating in us all the time, below the level of our awareness. The first step to mastering your emotional self is to catch them in action. When you feel a strong emotion, anger, excitement, fear, ask yourself, how is this feeling shaping my thoughts right now? Am I looking for the truth, or am I just looking for a way to feel better? Just by asking that question, you create a little bit of distance. You create a space between the emotion and your reaction. And in that space, rationality can begin to grow. It's like what the ancient Greeks imagined with Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who would visit heroes in their darkest moments. She wasn't a voice that shouted, she was a quiet, calming presence that allowed them to see clearly and find the right path. This inner Athena exists within all of us. It's that part of you that can think long-term, that can see the consequences of your actions, and that can resist the pull of immediate gratification. Cultivating it is a lifelong practice, but it begins with a simple decision: to stop being a slave to your emotions and to start becoming their master. Once we begin to understand our own irrationality, we start to notice something else. We are all incredibly self-absorbed. In any conversation, think about how much of your mental energy is spent not on listening, but on waiting for your turn to talk, to share your story, to give your opinion. We are all the main character in our own movie. This brings us to the second law, one of the most powerful and often misunderstood forces in human nature, the law of narcissism. Now, when we hear the word narcissist, we usually think of someone who is vain, arrogant, and constantly seeking attention. But Robert Greene offers a much deeper and more useful way to understand it. He asks us to imagine narcissism not as a simple character flaw, but as a spectrum of self-absorption that we are all on. From the moment we're born, we have a deep, primal need for attention. As babies, our survival depends on it. If we don't get attention, we don't get fed. But as we grow, this need becomes psychological. We need to feel seen, recognized, and valued by others. Our entire sense of self-worth is built on the quality of attention we receive. The problem is, there's a limited amount of attention to go around. We have to compete for it with our siblings, our classmates, our colleagues. We can't rely on others to constantly validate us. So, from a very early age, we develop a brilliant solution. We create a self, an internal image of who we are that we can love and rely on. This self is made up of our tastes, our opinions, our values. It's our personality. This self-image acts like a thermostat, regulating our self-esteem. When we feel ignored or unappreciated, we can retreat into this self and feel worthy. Most of us exist on the healthy end of the narcissistic spectrum. We have a solid sense of self that allows us to function. We can turn our attention outward, toward our work, our relationships, and the world around us. But some people, for reasons often rooted in a difficult childhood, never develop this stable inner self. They may have been abandoned, or, just as damagingly, they may have been enmeshed by a parent who lived through them, giving them no room to form their own identity. These are the people who fall into the realm of deep narcissism. Without that inner thermostat, they are completely dependent on external validation. Their entire existence is a desperate, unending quest for attention. You can recognize deep narcissists by a few key patterns. They are hypersensitive to criticism. Any challenge to their fragile ego is felt like a physical attack. They have no internal defense, no well of self-love to draw from, so they often react with explosive rage or a thirst for revenge. They will almost always position themselves as the victim. They constantly turn the conversation back to themselves. If you're talking about your vacation, they'll interrupt to tell you about a better vacation they once had. They are not listening to you. They are waiting for an opening to talk about themselves. They see other people not as individuals, but as self-objects, extensions of themselves, there only to provide them with attention and validation. This is why relationships with deep narcissists are so draining. Everything must revolve around them. Greene gives us the chilling example of Joseph Stalin. In his early years, Stalin could be surprisingly charming. He would listen to people with an intense focus that made them feel incredibly important. He was a master at mimicking empathy. But it was all a performance designed to draw people in and make them useful to him. As his power grew, the mask began to slip. He became paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere. His closest friends became objects to be controlled and, eventually, destroyed. He couldn't tolerate anyone who drew attention away from him. He needed to be the absolute center of the universe. This is the deep narcissist in power, and it is a terrifying thing. So, what is the antidote to this self-absorption that we all possess? The answer lies in turning this energy outward. The highest form of human connection is empathy. Empathy is not just feeling sorry for someone. It's the ability to step outside of yourself and see the world from another person's perspective. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed with practice. Greene lays out a 4-part framework for building our empathic muscle. It starts with the empathic attitude. This means approaching every interaction with the assumption that you are ignorant. Let go of your tendency to judge and categorize people. Everyone you meet is a new country to be explored. Be curious. In conversations, reverse your natural impulse to talk and focus entirely on listening. Next is visceral empathy. This is about attuning yourself to the nonverbal cues people are constantly emitting. Pay attention to their tone of voice, their body language, the tension in their face. These cues often tell you more than their words. They reveal the underlying emotions, anxiety, defensiveness, excitement, that are driving their behavior. Then there is analytic empathy. This involves gathering information about people's past, their values, and their family background. Understanding where someone comes from helps you understand why they are the way they are. Abraham Lincoln was a master of this. He once said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." He understood that understanding breeds tolerance. Finally, you put it all together in the empathic skill. This is about getting feedback. You practice, you observe, you make guesses about what people are feeling, and you adjust. Over time, your reads become more and more accurate. Developing empathy is transformative. It doesn't just make you better at dealing with people, it makes you a more complete human being. It pulls you out of the prison of your own ego and connects you to the vast, complex world of others. You move up the narcissistic spectrum, from self-absorption to connection. You become a healthy narcissist, someone with a strong sense of self who doesn't need constant validation and can therefore freely give their attention to others. This brings us to a critical part of understanding people. If we are all, to some degree, self-absorbed and playing a role, how do we ever know who anyone really is? This is the central question behind the law of role-playing. We humans are consummate actors. From the moment we are born, we learn how to put on a mask to get what we want. As children, we learn which expressions will get us sympathy from our parents. As we get older, we learn how to present the right front to fit in with our friends, to get a job, to navigate the complex social world. We play the part of the diligent student, the confident leader, the humble employee. As Shakespeare famously wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." We are so good at this acting that we often forget we're even doing it. We believe we are being our authentic selves, when in reality we are constantly adjusting our performance to suit the audience. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Society wouldn't be able to function if we all went around expressing our every thought and impulse. The mask is essential for social harmony. The problem arises when we mistake the mask for the reality. When we believe that the charming, polite person in front of us is all there is, we leave ourselves vulnerable. We are inevitably surprised when their hidden insecurities, their envy, or their aggression suddenly leaks out. Greene tells us that the mask, fortunately, always has cracks in it. Our true feelings are constantly leaking out in nonverbal cues that we cannot completely control. These are the flashes of irritation in the eyes, the tension in the jaw, the slight hesitation in the voice. This is the second language that people are speaking all the time, and our task is to become fluent in it. The story of Milton Erickson is a powerful example of this. As a teenager, Erickson was struck down by polio and left almost completely paralyzed. He could only move his eyeballs. Trapped in his bed, unable to speak or move, his world shrank to the small room where his family would gather and talk. With nothing else to do, he began to observe. And he started to notice something strange. He saw one of his sisters say yes to another, but her face held a slight smirk and her tone was flat. The yes clearly meant no. He saw her shake her head no ever so slightly while verbally agreeing to something. He became obsessed with this second language. He saw how people's words were often a cover for their true desires. He could see the tension in someone's face that betrayed their fake smile, or the impatience in the way they brushed back their hair. This experience transformed him. When he later recovered and became a pioneering psychiatrist, he used this skill to see into the unconscious of his patients. He would observe their walk, their posture, the way they sat in a chair. He once diagnosed a woman's secret love affair simply by the way she tightly crossed her legs, with one foot tucked completely around her ankle. He explained that in his experience, every married woman having an affair locked her body up in a similar way. He learned that the body does not lie, even when the mouth does. Like Erickson, we can train ourselves to become superior readers of people. This isn't about learning a set of tricks, it's about shifting our focus. We are so fixated on the words people say. We need to learn to listen with our eyes. Greene gives us some key areas to focus on. Look for mixed signals. This is when someone's body language contradicts their words. They congratulate you on a promotion, but their smile is tight and their eyes look sad. The negative cue is almost always the more reliable one. It's the leakage of their true feeling, in this case, envy. Pay attention to what happens when people are under stress, tired, or have been drinking. In these moments, their ability to control their mask weakens, and their true character often emerges. A person who seems calm and collected might suddenly become petty and paranoid under pressure. What you're seeing is not a momentary lapse, you're seeing the real person. It's also crucial to establish a baseline. Everyone has a normal way of behaving. Some people are naturally more animated, others are more reserved. Once you know someone's baseline, you can pay attention to any deviations. If a normally quiet person suddenly becomes loud and boisterous, or a confident person starts fidgeting nervously, it's a sign that something is going on beneath the surface. While we are learning to see through the masks of others, we must also become masters of impression management. We must be conscious of the role we are playing and learn to present the best possible front. This isn't about being fake, it's about being a skillful social actor. This means mastering your own nonverbal cues. Learn to project confidence through relaxed posture and steady eye contact. Learn to flash a genuine smile, one that involves the muscles around your eyes. These small signals can have a powerful effect on how people perceive you. It also means adapting your performance to your audience. The way you speak to your boss should be different from the way you speak to a subordinate or a close friend. This is not deception, it's social intelligence. Ultimately, the goal is not just to see through the masks, but to understand what lies behind them. What drives people's compulsive behavior? What is the true strength of their character? This leads us to the law of compulsive behavior. Greene argues that the most important thing to look for in a person is not their reputation, their intelligence, or their charm. It is their character. Character, he says, is like a stamp that is engraved on us from our earliest years. It's a collection of habits and patterns that compels us to act in certain ways, often beyond our awareness. As the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, character is destiny. If you ignore a person's character, you will inevitably be surprised and harmed by their actions. People don't do something just once. The person who disappears under stress will do it again. The colleague who takes credit for your work will do it again. The partner who betrays your trust will do it again. These are not isolated incidents, they are expressions of a deep-seated pattern. The story of Howard Hughes is a tragic illustration of this law. To the world, Hughes was a dashing maverick, a brilliant filmmaker, and an aviation pioneer. He built a myth around himself as the rugged individualist who did everything his own way. But beneath this glittering facade was a deeply flawed character. Hughes's mother had smothered him with anxious attention, and his father placed enormous expectations on him. He grew up feeling both completely dependent and bitterly resentful of that dependence. When his parents died suddenly, leaving him an orphan at 19, his true character emerged. He became obsessed with having absolute control over every aspect of his life. Anything less stirred up his old anxieties of being helpless. This deep need for control became the compulsive pattern that defined his entire life. When he made the film Hell's Angels, he fired director after director because he couldn't stand anyone else having authority. He had to oversee every shot, every detail. The film was a hit, but it went wildly over budget and lost a fortune. He told everyone he had learned his lesson, but he hadn't. Years later, when his company Hughes Aircraft got a massive government contract to build planes for World War II, the exact same pattern repeated. He couldn't delegate authority. He had to be consulted on the smallest decision. The company was chaotic, and top engineers quit in frustration. By the end of the war, not a single plane had been produced. He was a terrible businessman, but the profitable tool company he inherited from his father masked his failures and kept the myth of his genius alive. People like Charles Perrell, a brilliant production manager, were lured in by Hughes's charm and his reputation. Hughes would promise them full authority, but within weeks, he would be undermining their decisions and micromanaging everything. He repeated this pattern over and over, in filmmaking, in aviation, and in his personal relationships, leaving a trail of chaos and failed projects in his wake. In the end, his desperate need for control led him to lose it completely, as he descended into drug addiction and isolation, a prisoner of his own character. We are often blinded by people's reputations, just as so many were with Hughes. We fall for their charm and their glittering resumes. We must train ourselves to look deeper, to see the patterns in their past. So, how do you gauge the strength of someone's character? Greene tells us to look for a few key signs. How do they handle adversity? Do they crumble under pressure, or do they rise to the occasion? People of strong character are resilient. They see setbacks as learning experiences. How do they work with other people? Are they able to delegate and trust others, or do they need to control everything? Strong characters can subsume their own ego for the good of the group. How do they handle power? As Lincoln said, if you want to test a man's character, give him power. Does success make them more arrogant and entitled, or do they remain grounded and respectful? Power doesn't change people. It reveals who they truly are. And what about your own character? You must be just as ruthless in examining your own patterns. What are the compulsive mistakes you keep making? What are the underlying insecurities that drive them? You cannot simply wish your character away. It is too deeply ingrained. But through awareness, you can begin to recognize your negative patterns and work to change them. You can transform your weaknesses into strengths. This is the path to true self-mastery. You accept the clay of your character and learn to sculpt it into something stronger and more beautiful. You stop being a prisoner of your past and become the author of your own destiny. Now, as we learn to see through the masks and understand the character of others, we need a way to influence them, to get them to move from their naturally defensive positions and see our point of view. This is where the law of defensiveness comes in. Life is competitive. We are all looking out for our own interests. We also have a deep need to feel that we are independent, that we are making our own choices. That's why, when someone tries to persuade us or change our mind, our first reaction is often to become resistant. To give in feels like a surrender, a challenge to our autonomy. If you try to change people's minds by arguing with them or proving them wrong, you will almost always fail. You might win the argument, but you will lose the person. Why? Because you've made them feel stupid. You've attacked their self-opinion. Greene explains that we all have a core self-opinion made up of 3 universal beliefs. 1. I am autonomous, acting of my own free will. 2. I am intelligent in my own way. 3. I am basically a good and decent person. Any attempt at influence that challenges these core beliefs will be met with a wall of resistance. The key to persuasion is to do the opposite. You must confirm people's self-opinion. You must make them feel validated. The story of Lyndon B. Johnson's rise to power in the Senate is a masterclass in this law. When Johnson first arrived in the Senate in 1949, he was an impatient, ambitious young man. He made the mistake of approaching the powerful older Senator Tom Connally and essentially demanding a seat on a prestigious committee. Connally, feeling his authority challenged, put Johnson in his place, humiliating him. Johnson realized his mistake. He had come on too strong. He had to completely change his approach. He transformed himself into the picture of deference. He would visit the offices of the powerful older senators, not to ask for anything, but to seek their advice. He would listen with rapt attention, his eyes wide, nodding as they shared their wisdom. He made them feel like brilliant mentors, the old masters of the Senate. This was especially effective with Senator Richard Russell, one of the most powerful and lonely men in Washington. Johnson became his disciple, his surrogate son. He mirrored Russell's values, his work ethic, even his interest in baseball. He never asked for anything directly. Instead, he did favors for Russell, helping him modernize his staff. When Johnson finally wanted something, like a key committee chairmanship, he would simply insinuate his desire, and Russell, seeing Johnson as an extension of himself, would make it happen. Johnson understood that the golden key to influence is to lower people's defenses. He did this by making them feel secure in their self-opinion. He validated their intelligence by asking for their advice. He confirmed their goodness by appealing to their sense of duty to the party and the country. He respected their autonomy by never seeming to force their hand. So, how can you apply this? First, transform yourself into a deep listener. In any conversation, make your goal to understand the other person, not to promote your own ideas. Let them be the star of the show. People are so hungry for this kind of attention that they will become addicted to your presence. Second, infect them with the proper mood. We are all incredibly susceptible to the moods of others. If you approach people with an attitude of warmth, acceptance, and even indulgence, they will unconsciously mirror it back to you. They will relax in your presence. Laughter and shared pleasures are powerful tools for building rapport. Third, confirm their self-opinion. Never make people feel stupid. Even if you disagree with them, find a point of agreement first. Say, I can see why you feel that way, and in many ways, you're right. Here's another way to look at it. By validating their intelligence first, you open their mind to your suggestion. Frame your requests in a way that makes them feel noble and altruistic. They aren't just doing you a favor, they are contributing to a larger cause. Fourth, allay their insecurities. Everyone is insecure about something. Identify what people are most uncertain about, their creativity, their looks, their status, and offer subtle praise and reassurance in that area. As Lord Chesterfield advised his son, if you want to flatter a great statesman, don't praise his political skill, which he is already sure of. Praise his poetry, which he is secretly insecure about. And finally, use their resistance. Some people are naturally stubborn and resistant. They will do the opposite of what you suggest, simply to assert their will. With these types, you can use a form of mental judo. Instead of pushing against their resistance, you go with it. You might even advocate for the very thing you don't want. In rebelling against your suggestion, they will move in the direction you desired all along. This is the essence of reverse psychology. By mastering these strategies, you can become a master persuader. You learn to tame your own ego and focus entirely on the psychology of the other person. You are not manipulating them. You are leading them to see your point of view as their own, a decision they make of their own free will. This brings us to one of the most primal forces in human psychology: desire. We are creatures who are constantly wanting what we do not have. This is the foundation of the law of covetousness. Think about it. The moment we possess something, its allure begins to fade. Our minds begin to drift towards something new, something different, something just out of reach. The more distant and unattainable an object seems, the more we desire it. This is the grass is always greener syndrome, and it is deeply wired into our nature. The story of Coco Chanel is the story of someone who understood this law intuitively and used it to build an empire. Chanel grew up an orphan in a bleak convent, where luxuries were forbidden. Her only escape was through romance novels, which filled her mind with fantasies of a world of wealth, beauty, and freedom, a world she could never have. This early experience of longing and forbidden desire shaped her entire psychology. She began her career as the mistress of a wealthy man, living in a beautiful chateau. She had, in a way, achieved her dream. But she was quickly disappointed. The reality was boring. The other courtesans were beautiful, but she felt like an outsider. She was restless. Then, one day, she did something strange. She started wearing her lover's clothes, his tweed coats, his open-collared shirts. She topped it off with a simple straw boater hat. Suddenly, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known, leaving behind the corsets and constricting gowns of the era. And she noticed something else. She was getting a new kind of attention. The other women were watching her with a look she recognized. It was envy. It was desire. In that moment, something clicked. She realized that instead of being the one who was always wanting, she could be the one who was wanted. She could be the object that stimulated fantasies in others. All she had to do was reverse her perspective and understand what creates desire. She understood that desire is built on mystery. She never talked about her impoverished past, instead inventing countless contradictory stories. No one really knew who she was. This blankness allowed people to project their own fantasies onto her. She became a myth. She understood that desire is linked to what is transgressive. Her clothes had a masculine edge, but remained feminine. They allowed women to cross gender boundaries, to feel a bit rebellious and provocative. She understood that we desire what others desire. This is the principle of social proof. She gave her hats and clothes to beautiful, well-connected women. When these Chanel clones were seen at all the best parties, it created a chain reaction of desire. Everyone wanted to be part of this exclusive new club. And she understood that desire is fed by absence. When she launched her famous perfume, Chanel No. 5, she didn't do a massive advertising campaign. She started by subtly spraying it in her store. When women asked what that amazing new scent was, she would feign ignorance. She slipped unlabeled bottles into the bags of her best clients. Soon, a buzz began to build. Women were begging to buy this mysterious new perfume that no one could get. By making it scarce and elusive, she made it irresistible. Chanel transformed ordinary objects, a straw hat, cheap jersey fabric, a blend of floral scents, into objects of intense desire. She didn't sell clothes. She sold a fantasy of freedom, rebellion, and modern elegance. Greene tells us that we can all learn to apply this law. Instead of focusing on what you want, focus on the psychology of your audience. What are their unmet fantasies? What is missing in their lives? Create an aura of mystery around yourself and your work. Don't be an open book. Let people wonder about you. Associate what you offer with something new, exotic, or slightly taboo. Go against the grain. Challenge conventions. Create the illusion of popularity. Make it seem that others desire you or your work. This could be through testimonials, social proof, or creating a sense of exclusivity. And learn to use strategic absence. If you are too present, too available, people will take you for granted. By withdrawing from time to time, you make them want your return. You make them desire your presence. In a world saturated with noise and constant self-promotion, the person who understands the art of creating desire, the person who knows how to be an elusive and mysterious object, will have immense power. Now, as we've seen, success and attention can be intoxicating. They can feed our natural grandiosity, that deep-seated need to think highly of ourselves. But when this self-opinion becomes disconnected from reality, it becomes a dangerous delusion. This is the law of grandiosity. We all have a bit of grandiosity in us. It's what gives us the confidence to take on challenges and push past our limits. But when we achieve a measure of success, this can spiral out of control. We start to believe our own myth. We forget the role that luck, timing, and the help of others played in our achievements. We imagine we have the golden touch. The story of Michael Eisner's rise and fall at Disney is a cautionary tale of what happens when grandiosity goes unchecked. When Eisner took over as CEO of Disney in 1984, the company was a sleeping giant. He was a brilliant executive with a proven formula for success from his time at Paramount Pictures. He kept costs down, focused on high-concept films, and in a few short years, turned Disney into the hottest studio in Hollywood. The success was staggering, and so was the attention. Eisner was on the cover of magazines, hailed as a corporate genius, the heir to Walt Disney himself. And he started to believe it. He began to subtract from his success the elements of luck, like inheriting the vast Disney library just as the home video market was exploding, and the crucial contributions of his team, especially his president Frank Wells and his studio chief Jeffrey Katzenberg. His grandiosity, fed by success, led him to make increasingly irrational decisions. He became obsessed with building Euro Disney, not because it was a sound business decision. In fact, many advised against the Paris location, but because he saw it as a cultural statement, a monument to his own genius. He ignored his own cost-cutting formula and poured billions into the project. It turned into a financial disaster. As things started to go wrong, he couldn't admit he had made a mistake. His grandiose self-opinion wouldn't allow it. Instead, he started to blame others. He turned on Jeffrey Katzenberg, the man behind the animation renaissance that had saved the company with hits like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. He saw Katzenberg not as a valuable asset, but as a rival for attention, a threat to his myth. He became paranoid, believing Katzenberg was trying to undermine him. In 1994, in a fit of what can only be described as delusional rage, he fired Katzenberg, the most successful executive in Hollywood. It was the beginning of the end. He made one disastrous decision after another, culminating in the hiring of his friend Michael Ovitz as president, only to sabotage and humiliate him for 14 months before firing him. He had become so detached from reality, so consumed by his own ego, that he destroyed the very empire he had built. We are all susceptible to this success delusion. When things are going well, our natural grandiosity gets inflated. We must learn to counteract this pull. After any success, take the time to analyze it. Acknowledge the role of luck and the contributions of others. This will keep you grounded. Never stop learning. Success can make us complacent. We rely on the formula that worked in the past, and we stop adapting. Treat every new project as if you are starting from zero. Listen to criticism. Grandiose people are notoriously thin-skinned. They see any criticism as a personal attack. You must actively seek out feedback, especially from people who are not afraid to tell you the truth. And finally, tie your sense of greatness not to your ego, but to your work. Focus on your craft, on solving problems, on contributing to something larger than yourself. This is what Greene calls practical grandiosity. It's a healthy ambition that is rooted in reality and accomplishment, not in fantasy. The gods of history are merciless with those who fly too high on the wings of grandiosity. They will always bring you crashing back down to earth. By knowing your limits and maintaining a realistic assessment of yourself, you can avoid this fate. As we navigate the complexities of our own nature and the people around us, we often feel adrift. We are pulled in different directions by our moods, by the opinions of others, by the lure of easy pleasure. We find ourselves in jobs or relationships without quite knowing how we got there. We sense a lack of direction, a feeling of aimlessness. This brings us to one of the most profound laws in the book, the law of aimlessness. Unlike animals, who are guided by instinct, we humans have to rely on our conscious decisions. But without a compass, we are lost. Greene argues that the way to avoid this fate, to find our direction in the chaos of life, is to discover our sense of purpose. This purpose, or life's work, as Greene calls it, is not something you invent. It's something you discover. It's a voice from within that speaks to your uniqueness. We are all born with a set of primal inclinations, a natural attraction to certain subjects or activities. For Marie Curie, it was the mesmerizing sight of the chemistry instruments in her father's office when she was 4 years old. For Steve Jobs, it was the wondrous gadgets in the window of an electronics store. For the writer Flannery O'Connor, it was her father's belief in her destiny as a writer, a belief she held on to after his early death. These are not random interests, they are signals of our calling. As we get older, this inner voice is often drowned out by the voices of others, our parents, our teachers, our peers. We are told what we should be, what we should like. We lose contact with our own uniqueness. We choose career paths that are practical or prestigious, but that have no real connection to our spirit. This is the source of the deep boredom, insecurity, and depression that so many of us feel in midlife. The journey to finding your purpose is a journey of reconnection. It's about listening for that inner voice you have long ignored. Greene tells us to look back at our childhood. What were the subjects or activities that fascinated you, that felt natural and easy? What did you do that brought you a feeling of flow, where you lost track of time? These are clues to your calling. Once you have a sense of your life's work, it becomes your internal guidance system. It gives you a direction, a path to follow. It doesn't mean your path will be a straight line. You can still explore and have adventures. But there is an overall direction that frees you from the anxiety of aimlessness. The story of Martin Luther King Jr. is a powerful example of a man finding and following his purpose. As a young man, King was pulled in many directions. His father wanted him to be a minister and take over his church. His professors wanted him to become a scholar. His wife wanted him to live a comfortable, safe life in the North. King himself loved parties, nice clothes, and the academic life. But he felt a different calling. He had a vision of returning to the South, of becoming a minister in a community where he could make a practical difference. This vision was so strong that he chose to go to Montgomery, Alabama, one of the most segregated and dangerous cities in the country. It was a decision that made no practical sense, but he felt it was his destiny. When the Montgomery bus boycott erupted, he was reluctantly pulled into a leadership role. He was filled with fear and self-doubt. The death threats, the infighting, the immense pressure, it was more than he had bargained for. One night, on the verge of quitting, he prayed for strength. And in that moment, he heard a voice from within, a voice he was sure was God's, telling him to stand up for righteousness. "And I will be with you." This experience galvanized him. The voice gave him a higher sense of purpose that transcended his personal fears. It became his compass. It guided him through the darkest days of the civil rights movement. It gave him the courage to go to Birmingham, to provoke a crisis that would awaken the conscience of the nation. It gave him the clarity to see that his mission was not just about civil rights, but about fighting poverty and injustice everywhere. A high sense of purpose acts as a force multiplier. It channels all the different sides of your character in one direction. It gives you focus, resilience, and an unstoppable energy. It raises you above the petty distractions and dramas of daily life. Discovering your calling is the most important task in your life. It is the path to fulfillment and to realizing your full potential. Do not leave it to chance. Listen for that inner voice. Trust your inclinations. And once you find your path, follow it with all the strength you can muster. As we've explored these deep forces within ourselves, our irrationality, our narcissism, our aggression, it's become clear that we often wear a mask, a persona that hides our true feelings. This hidden part of our personality is what Carl Jung called the shadow. Understanding it is the key to the law of repression. The shadow is made up of all the qualities we try to deny about ourselves. It's our insecurities, our selfish impulses, our secret desires for power or revenge. As children, we were bursting with this raw, untamed energy. We were aggressive, selfish, and manipulative when we wanted something. But as we grew up, we were socialized. We learned to be nice, to be cooperative, to fit in. All of those socially unacceptable traits were pushed underground, into the shadow. We are generally unaware of our own shadow. It operates in the unconscious. But it doesn't just disappear. It leaks out in strange ways. It comes out in our dreams. It emerges in moments of stress, in emotional outbursts, in accidental behavior where we do something self-destructive and blame it on an uncontrollable impulse. It reveals itself in our vehement denials, when we loudly condemn a quality in others that we secretly possess ourselves. The story of Richard Nixon is a tragic portrait of a man destroyed by his own shadow. To the public, Nixon crafted a persona of toughness, resilience, and iron-willed rationality. He was the new Nixon, a man who had overcome every setback. But this was a mask that concealed a deeply insecure and vulnerable child within. Nixon's childhood was marked by a cold, abusive father and a moody, often absent mother. He grew up feeling unloved and needy. To survive, he repressed these feelings and built a tough exterior. But the unloved child was still there, in the shadows of his personality. As president, especially under the stress of the office, his shadow would emerge. In private, late-night meetings with his staff, the tough, rational leader would disappear, and the dark Nixon would take over. He would become paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere. He would rant about his old political wounds, his voice filled with bitterness and a thirst for revenge. He would indulge in anti-Semitic and racist tirades. This was the Nixon on the secret White House tapes. It was a man so consumed by his insecurities that he was willing to break the law to get an edge on his political opponents. The Watergate break-in was not a rational political calculation. It was an act of the shadow, a product of his paranoia and his deep-seated need to crush his enemies. When the existence of the tapes was revealed, Nixon was trapped. He couldn't destroy them, because that would be an admission of guilt. But he couldn't release them, because they would reveal the dark side he had spent his entire life trying to conceal. In the end, the tapes were his undoing. They revealed a man who was not strong, but weak, not rational, but driven by petty resentments and childish insecurities. As he said in his final emotional speech to his staff, "Those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself." He was, in that moment, describing his own tragedy. We all have a shadow. The more we repress it, the more powerful and dangerous it becomes. The goal is not to eliminate the dark side, That's impossible. It's to become aware of it, to confront it, and to integrate it into our personality. How do we do this? First, see the shadow. Look for its signs in your own behavior. Notice your emotional outbursts, your moments of extreme touchiness. Pay attention to the qualities you vehemently deny in yourself or harshly judge in others. These are often reflections of your own repressed traits. Look at your dreams. They are a direct line to your unconscious. Second, embrace the shadow. Don't be ashamed of your dark side. It is a part of what makes you human. Abraham Lincoln was aware of his own split personality, a cold, ambitious streak on one side, and a deep melancholy on the other. Instead of denying these qualities, he channeled them. He poured his aggressive energy into winning debates and elections. He transformed his sensitivity into a profound empathy for the public. Third, explore the shadow. Your unconscious contains immense creative energy. Learn to tap into it. Give yourself unstructured time to play with ideas. Pay attention to your intuitions and hunches. Some of the greatest discoveries in science and art have come not from logical deduction, but from flashes of insight that bubble up from the unconscious. And finally, show the shadow. We spend so much energy trying to be nice and agreeable. This can make us timid and inauthentic. You must learn to consciously show your darker, more assertive qualities. This doesn't mean being a jerk. It means being willing to be impudent, to challenge conventions, to care less about what people think of you. It means being more authentically yourself. When you integrate your shadow, you become a more complete and powerful human being. You are no longer at war with yourself. You radiate an authenticity that is magnetic. People are drawn to those who are comfortable in their own skin, who are not afraid to be fully human, with all the light and darkness that entails. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through the laws of human nature, it's easy to feel a little overwhelmed. The book is vast, filled with stories and insights that challenge the way we see ourselves in the world. But if there is one central lesson to take away from Robert Greene's work, it is this: self-awareness is the ultimate power. This book is not a manual for manipulating others. It's a mirror. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths about our own nature, our irrationality, our narcissism, our aggression, our tendency to conform. We are not the purely rational, independent, and good-hearted individuals we like to imagine ourselves to be. We are complex, contradictory creatures, driven by deep-seated forces that we are often unaware of. The path to wisdom, then, is not to deny these forces, but to understand them. It's to become a dispassionate observer of your own psychology. When you can see the envy stirring within you, you can choose to transform it into emulation instead of letting it curdle into resentment. When you can feel the pull of grandiosity after a success, you can consciously ground yourself in reality. When you can recognize the group's emotional contagion sweeping over you, you can create the mental space to think for yourself. This is the freedom that Greene's work offers. It is not freedom from human nature, but freedom within it. It's the freedom that comes from understanding the rules of the game, so that you are no longer a pawn, but a player. So, how can you begin to apply these profound lessons in your own life, starting today? Here are a few simple, practical actions you can take. First, practice the art of deep listening. For the next 24 hours, in every conversation you have, make your sole objective to understand the other person's point of view. Fight the urge to plan what you'll say next. Fight the urge to tell your own story. Just listen. Pay attention not just to their words, but to their tone, their body language. You will be amazed at what you discover, both about them and about yourself. Second, become a pattern detective. Think of one negative pattern that keeps recurring in your life. It could be in your relationships, your career, or your creative projects. Now, for a moment, let go of the story you usually tell yourself about why this happens, the story that blames other people or bad luck. Ask yourself, with brutal honesty, what role does my own character, my own compulsive behavior, play in creating this pattern? This simple shift in perspective, from looking outward to looking inward, is the first step toward breaking free. And third, learn to see the shadow. Pay attention to a moment today when you feel a strong, negative emotional reaction to someone. It could be a celebrity, a politician, or someone you know personally. Ask yourself, what quality in this person is triggering such a strong response in me? Is it possible that this quality is something I deny or repress in myself? This is not about condoning bad behavior in others. It's about using your reactions as a mirror to see your own hidden depths. The Laws of Human Nature is not an easy book. It asks us to look at the parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. But in doing so, it offers a path to a more authentic, powerful, and fulfilling life. It teaches us that by understanding what makes us human, in all its darkness and its light, we can become more than just a product of our nature. We can become its master. That was a summary of The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. We certainly touched on the major themes today, but I have to be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the layout, but it can never replace the experience of actually walking the land yourself. The real power of this book is in the details, in the quiet moments when a particular historical story or a simple, profound sentence resonates with your own life in a way you never expected. This summary is a doorway. If any of the ideas we've explored have sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to step through it. Grab a copy of the book, because reading it isn't just an act of learning, it's an experience that can fundamentally change the way you see yourself and everyone around you. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please consider giving this a like and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's continue to grow and learn together.